Give it a moment to get ready here. Okay, how's that looking now for everybody? Do you see it on the club's channel?
Did you repost the link to the club channel?
I thought I did. Let me try that again.
I just see the one that you posted originally. I could see the broadcast on, but did you change it and you have to send another link?
Did you try that? Club's channel?
That I can see. The second link worked.
All right, that's the club's channel, correct?
Repost the link to the club channel? Yeah, it's there in the chat.
Thought I did.
It's the second. Again. I just see the one that you posted originally. I could see the broadcast on, but did you change it and you have to send another link?
Did you try that?
It's there.
Club's channel?
That I can see. The second link worked. Yep.
All right, that's the club's channel, correct?
Repost the link. Yeah, it's there in the chat.
Thought I did. All right, you know what? My volume is, I'm getting volume from the YouTube and volume from the computer. So let me fix this, because I'm thoroughly confused. Doesn't take much. Wow, we got 40 people. Okay, is everything working?
Looks like it.
We have 38 participants.
And you're recording?
And we are live now. Recording. The thing is, I have to figure out which one is the current one, because the mistake that we made before. There's two streams coming in. I guess it's not this one. Okay. I think we're ready to go. I'm gonna just say hello to everybody on the chat, on the YouTube. If you have any questions, all right, you guys able to see the correspondence that I'm typing? Fantastic.
Yeah, we can see it on YouTube.
All right, whenever we're ready. Agapios, what do you think? Should we get started?
I'm waiting for your call. I'm
Yeah.
ready to go.
All right,
Yeah.
I think we're ready.
Okay.
We're recording live.
Well, hi everybody. Good morning. Thank you for having me once again. This is a great group. I've had a really great time last time we met, and I'm very happy to be back. Sadly, I'm not able to show you Mars live. There's a bit of an unexpected thunderstorm happening outside. But I do have fresh data that I just got a few days ago that I'm showing now on the screen. So we can go through processing and show you how to work with your data. And at the end, I'm gonna share this data set that I got a few days ago. I don't know, Lou, we'll find some way to I'll share maybe, I don't know, a zip file or a drive link or something, so you guys can work on this data and maybe share back some of your versions of processing this data so we can compare. So typically, where I live here on Cyprus, the weather is good most of the time. I'm very fortunate to live at an island where I have, apart from tonight, a very high number of clear nights. I call it the astronomer's paradise. It's the ideal place to be if you want to do this sort of thing. It's mostly clear all of the time, and seeing conditions can be often very good, especially down by the coast. Not so much where I live, where I image most of the time, but down by the coast, any time that I've been down there for imaging or observing, it is absolutely superb. So now we've got Mars, who's just been at closest approach on the 2nd of December. For my latitude at 34 degrees north, Mars transits at 74 degrees, which is fantastic. It's nice and high, almost up at the zenith. So there's minimum distortion from the atmosphere, as you often get when the planets are much lower in the sky. And I don't know if we talked about this the last time we met, but I've been a big fan of using atmospheric dispersion correctors. And I've been able to test it this year with Mars at 74 degrees. And without any doubt, even at 74 degrees, dispersion is still detectable. So I've been leaving my dispersion corrector unset on purpose. And sure enough, dispersion is an issue, much less than what it would be with the planets much lower in the sky. But even at that height, at that elevation, dispersion is still showing up. So whoever is really dedicated and serious about pursuing high resolution planetary imaging, I've said this many times. I've talked about this. I've wrote about this, and I insist that an atmospheric dispersion corrector is the first thing you want to make sure you have and that you're comfortable with using. You can skim on the telescope, the mount, the camera, but don't on the atmospheric dispersion corrector. It's an absolute must-have accessory, especially now when these are so affordable. It wasn't the case a few years ago. Now they're readily available and very affordable and very effective. So as you know, I'm using a 9.25-inch Schmidt-Cassegrain telescope, a very popular planetary imaging telescope. And I'm a big fan of one-shot color imaging, mostly because the seeing conditions at home, here at home base, are very fluctuating. I've done a few extended tests with monochrome imaging, and I just wasn't able to complete a sequence with identical seeing conditions. And so I've become a very big fan of one-shot color imaging. Obviously, one-shot color cameras have gone quite a long way since back in the old times when we had your typical Philips webcam or simple small sensor one-shot color cameras. Now they're so much more sensitive, so much more capable, and more importantly, they've become very fast. And that is also another thing that I'm a huge proponent of, being able to capture at high frame rates. I've got this video playing now. This is playing back at 128 frames per second. So what you're looking at on the screen is a video file of Mars being played back at 128 frames per second. So every second on the screen, there's 128 individual frames shooting across the screen. And even with these conditions, which were fairly good, not excellent, not terrible, workable conditions, you can see the insane amount of variation happening in between frames. And let me just get this out of the way, and let me pause this, and we can go frame by frame so you can see what I mean. I mean, look at this. I hope that's coming through okay. I'm just clicking frame by frame so you can see the incredible amount of difference in resolution and clarity that we're getting between individual frames. I mean, look at this. These are much sharper, and just a few frames further down, and this is only a split second difference in time, in real time. The difference in clarity is insane. So when you're able to capture at high frame rates, what this essentially means is that when those tiny short bursts of better conditions occur, you are able to collect much more, a much higher number of frames, which then in turn you're going to stack, combine, and process to bring out your final result. So having started doing this kind of imaging in the webcam days, back in the early 2000s, using a typical Philips 2U cam or SPC, you would get at most 10, maybe 15 frames per second with a tiny 640 by 480 pixel chip. Today's modern cameras can do anywhere up to 150, 200, 300, maybe even more frames per second with much bigger and much better, much more sensitive sensors. Last time we met, I was still using the ASI 224 MC, which has been a very popular, very successful choice for high resolution planetary imaging. And with that, I could do on Mars, I could do maybe 340, 350 FPS easily with this telescope. For this season, I've just upgraded to one of the new Player One IMX 533 sensor cameras, which is a large sensor at 3000 by 3000 pixels, but incredibly sensitive. The 533 has been a very successful sensor for deep sky imaging, short exposure like imaging, typical DSO work, but it's proving to be a fantastic chip for planetary imaging as well. And the data that you're looking at on the screen now has been captured with this sensor. I have found it to be incredibly well performing in terms of noise. There's very, very little noise coming in from this sensor, and it's just so well behaved. And the camera in general is very well made, high quality. I highly recommend, and I have only good things to say about these new cameras in case anybody was considering them. They're definitely worth a look. I think they have about the same range and same price point as the ZWOs. Only a few things are different about them in terms of features, and I think they have maybe more onboard memory than the ZWOs, but more or less they're about the same. But yeah, these new sensors, 533, 2600, 585 also, they're just incredible to work with. Typically on my telescope, I shoot at about f/25, about 6,000 millimeters focal length. And on Mars, I'm able to, most of the time, pick out a decent amount of information and get some good resolution. We're playing back just one file from my last session on December 4th. And we can probably just tune the colors here a little bit, so make it a little bit more pleasing to the eye. I don't know how well you guys can see that. Guys, feel free to jump in with any questions or comments as we go. Okay, so here we go. I don't know if you can see how well you can see the North Polar Cap coming through the darker southern hemisphere on Mars here, and I can make out Olympus, Mount Olympus here on some frames. Let's see if I can find one. We're probably not going to be able to see it on an individual frame, but it's right there. So, as I said, we're going to go through processing and show you guys at least my way of doing things. But again, feel free to jump in and pitch in with any comments or questions. So I'm just going to open AutoStackered, which is the tool of choice nowadays for stacking. And let's open up the file. I think it was this one. Okay.
Agapios, we do have one question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Somebody wanted to know, why is it not more red in color?
Okay, so obviously the camera being a digital sensor, you can set the white balance so the color, let me just phrase this correctly, the way that the image is being captured can be tuned out further down so that it appears more realistic. These sensors, because they have twice as many green pixels than they do red and blue, they're always more green heavy, especially if you haven't tuned the white balance. So even though things appear miscolored, you can always sort them out further down. We're going to show that later in Registax, how you can bring the colors down to something more realistic. And let's put a note here, because there's one thing that I would like to talk about further down, which is how we decide to present our targets, especially Mars, in terms of color, because I see a lot of people choosing to go a certain route, which, at least in my view, is not ideal. So we'll chat about that further down. I hope I answered that question well enough. I'm on limited brain power now, but okay. All right, so I pulled up the file in AutoStackered, and I'm going to trim down all the unneeded black space over here using the image size controls. And I'm gonna ask AutoStacker to analyze this file. So what it's gonna do now is it's gone through the entire number of collected frames for each file, and it has compared them to each other, and it's serving up an analysis of the quality of those frames. So in this file, we have 4,000 frames, 4,058 frames. So it's looked at every single one of them, and it's classified them to each other. And we can see this quality graph, which essentially is the analysis that AutoStacker has done. So the frames that are sort of reaching up to the top here are the better frames, and the frames that are pushing down at the bottom are the worst frames. So obviously, as we're recording, the frame quality is random because of the seeing. If you're lucky enough to get excellent seeing, frames will be mostly good. If you live in non-exotic locations like I do, the quality is obviously random. And I like to think of frames as using a deck of cards with just the number cards. And imagine you've shuffled all of them together so that they're jumbled. And if you go through them one by one, you get a 1, a 9, a 7, a 5, a 6, a 4, a 2, a 3, whatever. A very randomized distribution of quality. AutoStackered has gone in, has sorted all of the frames with the better ones at the top and the worst ones at the bottom. So now, when I go through my file, if I go frame by frame, I'm looking at all the better frames first. And if I pull down here all the way back, here's at the end of the file all the bad frames. And this is, you can see this rather nicely here. I'm at the very last frame now, and you can see it's a distorted mess. And if I scroll back to the beginning, nice and sharp. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to select a percentage of the total number of frames that I've captured to be kept, to be stacked. Obviously, I don't want to use the bad frames. I don't want to use too few of the good frames. I want to strike a balance. Typically, I go maybe now not more than 25%. This is obviously system dependent and seeing dependent. And here's where you want to, here's where shooting at very high FPS is very beneficial, because if you are shooting at very high frame rate, you can be much more selective at this stage and still have a very healthy number of frames to work with. What this means is if I'm shooting at 300 whatever frames per second, I can go down to only picking 5% or 10% of my entire available frames, and those would still be a very good number of total frames to work with. They would still be in the thousands, which is what we want. We want to have as many as possible to stack. So for this file, looking at the graph, I don't know how well you can see the green curve. This green curve is the the frame quality after they have been redistributed by AutoStaggered. So if I choose to go to the 50% mark, you can see that I'm going to be using frames that are below the average quality. I don't want that. I want to use as good a frames as possible. If I stay at the 25%, I'm now going to be using frames that are 50%, which is to say average or better. And if I choose to go somewhere around the 15%, I'm going to be using frames that are good and better. I don't know how well that is coming through to you guys. So I'm just going to go and pick 15%. On AutoStaggered here, you can choose to stack by total number of frames or by frame percentage, and you can do this 4 times. AutoStaggered can automatically do 4 passes on each file. If you want to test things, you can do, say, a 50%, a 25, a 10, and a 5, or whatever other combination you want to do. So I'm just going to do a 15%, and I'm going to go to setting the alignment points. Now, alignment points are crucial because these are points of reference for AutoStaggered to compare to one another and better stitch the resulting stack. So you want to exercise some caution when you're using the alignment points. You can choose to go the automated way. AutoStaggered can take care of placing and sizing on its own, or you can choose to set your own. I highly recommend that you try both on the same data file and see which one serves up a better result for you. I'm just going to go ahead and do my normal alignment point setting. I like to choose places on the disk where there's obvious contrast, there's obvious features, and also you want to get these overlapping fairly well. There's no fixed direction that you have to take. There's no fixed direction when it comes to number of alignment points, sizing, or placing. And there's no way that this can exist. This is something where you have to experiment with your own data. In this kind of imaging, I'm just going to open a small parenthesis here. In this kind of imaging, I often see a lot of people looking for a secret setting or a secret bit of accessory or a secret methodology or something that magically turns junk into spectacular images. This thing does not exist. What you want to do is you want to experiment. Obviously, you want to be sure that your equipment is optimized, meaning you've got the right camera for the right telescope with the right Barlow lens. Your telescope is really well collimated, and you want to be out under good conditions. When all of these things coexist, then surely you're going to get, if not the maximum possible resolution coming through your system, you're going to get close to that. So you want to experiment using your own data and see what works best for you. And this is going to take time and dedication. And this is where most people fall off. But I highly recommend that you try that.
So, Agapios, we have a question in the chat.
Yeah, go ahead.
Jan wants to know what criteria does the algorithm use to determine whether a frame, quote unquote, is good?
It's just, yeah, that's a good question. It's just looking at general contrast and sharpness. And it's obviously, and this is critical to understand, it's comparing all the frames to each other, and it's coming up with an average. And it's doing that primarily for things like sharpness, contrast, and finest resolvable detail. I hope that answers the question.
Is it kind of analogous to like an autofocus in terms of what it's looking at, like a signal to noise measurement?
I'd say yes. I'm not exactly sure how the algorithm works, but mostly it has to do with overall. It's mostly contrast based. So it's looking at pixel level contrast information, comparing it to one another, and it's using the alignment points to better judge how to put all the good frames together, so that they can be combined in the most optimized way. And it's doing an excellent job. You can compare stacking the same data set with AutoStackered and any other software that you want to use, and you can see the difference. It's been extremely effective. Okay, so we've set the alignment points, and we're just going to hit on stack, and now the software is going in. It's only using the best 15% of those available files, and it should have put out a result. Let's see. Let's go back and see which one this was. 2114. Okay. So this is the stacked image using only the 15% better frames from the 4,000 totally available from the file. At this stage, we want to open this in a sharpening program. Registax is the tool of choice for this part, and I'm just gonna go in and open it. Here we go. Okay, so we've brought this into Registax, and let me get this out of the way, and we're just gonna go ahead and do some basic processing here. Obviously, we can automatically balance the colors, and this will produce a much less green heavy image, although not quite perfect in terms of presentation, but good enough for us to process. And we're going to go into sharpening. So Registax has the wavelet feature. Wavelets are, not sure if we talked about this the last time. Wavelets are sharpening filters that you can employ. There's 6 of them in at this stage, and they work progressively from finer to more coarse. So if I use number 1, it's only going to be doing very fine sharpening, If I use number 6, it's very coarse in the way that it sharpens. Again, here, don't look for specific settings. Play with your own data and see what works for you. You can choose different schemes of wavelets, and these work slightly differently. But do go ahead and experiment. Spend the time to see how these settings respond to your data. For me, I like to work my way from coarse to fine. So I employ something like number 3 first. I just gently work with this and see how the data responds, and then going on to finer and finer. And even though this is kind of the most satisfying part of the entire process, you don't want to go overboard. So exercise caution, keep an eye on the data, make sure that you're not over sharpening, you're not chasing the details so much that you end up with something that looks cartoony or more crafted than an actual photo. Exercise caution here and make sure that you're not blowing out any features. Keep an eye on the histogram. You can pull in a little zoom window here so you can better see what's going on. And the key here is to come up with a wavelet setting that works well for this data set and save it. One thing that we did not discuss at the beginning is when we're capturing, at least my methodology has been to capture continuously consecutive exposures using the exact same parameters over a long period of time. So I'm out there for a couple of hours and I'm shooting file after file after file after file continuously. And the reason for this is because somewhere in that extended period of time, better conditions will occur. And I don't want to rely on my own visual judgment of how good seeing is when I'm looking at the screen. Because you have to remember that when you're looking at the screen, when you're capturing, especially if you're employing these high speeds that we talked about before, I'm not sure how well our brains can keep up, especially not at this time, how well they can keep up with evaluating the live feed that we're looking at. So we may have better frames than we think. So you can take the luck out of the lucky imaging by shooting a string of data and processing all of those data, all of those files in exactly the same way. And you can do this by using schemes. So once you've set the wavelets the way that you want them to be, you can save this setting. You can go here and save it. I'm just going to replace the one that I already have. You can save it, and then when you restart Registax, it's going to have saved those settings, and you can just load up every other file that you've captured and employ exactly the same sharpening. It doesn't work for balancing or stretching. It only works for the sharpening. And let me just say that even though Registax is a very old piece of software, it's only last been updated 10, 11 years ago. The author is currently working on an updated version. If anybody's on Cloudy Nights, there's a discussion going in the Solar System Imaging Forum about the revamped version of Registax that they're currently working on, and that's something that at least I am very, very eager to try out, because as I said, Registax hasn't been updated in 10 years or so, and even so, it's still been an indispensable piece of software, primarily for its extremely effective sharpening features, the wavelets.
No, Agapios,
Yeah.
sometimes I would go in here twice or 3 times and save to compare, and it would drive me batty to figure out which one is the best combination. But doesn't PixInsight also have a similar functionality, as you know, you can control the wavelets? And how would you compare that with this?
I would assume that it should have. I have zero experience with PixInsight. I don't do almost no deep sky imaging. At least I haven't really used PixInsight. And I'm very much a person of habit. I've learned how to use Registax. I've learned how to use AutoStacker and all the software that's necessary for this kind of imaging, and I've stuck to it. So I'm really not the authority to know anything about PixInsight. You know more than I do on that.
So when you use wavelets here, you said you save one scheme. Do you only try that once, or you try a couple different sets, or is it just one?
Good question. What you can do is, in combination with AutoStacker, you can try. First of all, you can investigate how good your data is by trying up to 4 different stacks. So you can do, say, a 70%, a 50%, a 30%, a 10%, whatever. The numbers don't actually matter. You have to experiment on this. You can try 4 different stacks, and you can try on those 4 different stacks, you can try different wavelet schemes and see which one works best. The key here is that schemes or whatever wavelet settings you settle on, they're only valid for that particular session that you're using. Don't develop the bad habit of having set a scheme and just keeping that one and using that one on every time you're out, on every night that you're out, because your conditions are different. Your telescope will perform differently. Collimation is shifting if you haven't if you don't tend to it every time. So schemes are very subjective in that sense. I always save a new one for the particular data set. And another thing, I think we went through this last time. Say that I have captured 100, 150 consecutive files. I will go through all of them in AutoStacker. I can open all of them in batch mode. Let me just illustrate that. So here we have only one file open. You can see here it says 1 of 1. We can open all of them and we can stack all of them in exactly the same way. So let's just pull in, let's say, so I just picked 44 files now, and whatever I choose here is going to apply to all of those 44 files that I opened. So here, AutoStacker is going to give me folders with 44 stacks. Again, the number doesn't matter. It depends on what kind of data you're collecting. But what you can do is you can stack all of them with a general percentage, let's say 50%, and you can use schemes to equally process all of them so that you end up with a folder of sharpened stacks with exactly the same sharpening, exactly the same stacking, and the only difference would be the seeing conditions that occurred throughout that period of time. So there you can see the effects of seeing as well. And once you've done that, you can flip through them and try and isolate periods of time where the seeing was best. So let's say I have 44 files and seeing was better for files from number 28 to number 34, let's say, just for those 6. You can pick those 6 and then do another pass in AutoStacker using different criteria. You can maybe, because the seeing is better, you can use different alignment points. You can set them with better accuracy. You can employ different wavelet settings just for those 6 files, for those 6 better files. You can stack a finer percentage. When you do that, you're going to need to reset the wavelet scheme to better respond to that better set of files. So it's a dynamic process. I hope I explained it in a way such as it was clear.
So Agapios, I have a question that's not clear to me. So in AutoStacker, are you able to take separate video files and just cherry pick the highest quality ones from multiple files and then combine them in AutoStacker? Is that what you're saying?
Yes and no. You can batch process a large number of files. AutoStacker will give you. Let me show you. I think it's better if I show this. Okay. So in this folder, I have all my captures. So if I just choose, okay, so these are all the captures. Okay. I have 70 consecutive captures. So all of these are consecutive video files of Mars. Okay. So I will open all of them in AutoStacker. I think they start about here. Okay. So I will pick all of them. I will do a first pass. So let me trim this down. So it's going to analyze one of them. I'm going to set the alignment points, and I'm going to hit stack, and AutoStacker is going to give me a folder with stacks for all those files. I'm going to open all of them in Registacks and apply the same wavelet settings, the same sharpening settings. And when I flip through them, visually, I will look at my sharpened stacks and I will isolate better periods of seeing. And I'm going to take just those better ones. There could be 2 of them, 10 of them, 15 of them, whatever. And I'm going to get just those better ones, and I'm going to do another pass in AutoStacker just for those ones. And on those new ones, I'm going to use different wavelets, different sharpening settings. Now, the better files, let's say that there are a dozen of them. those better files, I can combine between them. I can stack the stacks in WinJupos, which is another piece of software that we use for a process called derotation. But this is sort of an investigative methodology, primarily for finding out where exactly in that period of time that we were out capturing did we get the better seeing conditions. That's the whole idea behind this kind of methodology. I hope that's clear.
Yeah, I was waiting for how you would be able to combine their best data from the whole night, and you're saying, well, that's not happening in AutoStack or the Registacks. It's happening in that third app. Where it can actually compensate for the moving of the rotation of Mars. It can actually compensate for that, so you can combine sessions, say data from the early in the night and late in the night, for example.
Exactly. So that's derotation. But the whole idea is giving you a tool so that you don't have to rely on luck when it comes to this kind of imaging. If you go out and you set everything up and it's doing captures for an extended period of time, and using this methodology, you're able to sift through all of that data and isolate the better pockets of air. And if you're keeping to this idea of shooting at high frame rates, when those better pockets of air happen, you have a lot of data to work with. So that's your best chance of getting a high signal to noise ratio result, so that you can go in and do your sharpening, do your derotation, and put out what would be at the end the best possible image for those conditions. I hope that was.
I mentioned something about this in our previous meeting, but I'm not remembering the answer, and maybe it would be useful for other people. How do you keep the object centered over a whole evening? I imagine you can't be using any auto guiding, so you have some other way of keeping the telescope, having the item stay in frame, the object stay in frame.
Well, this depends on what's your capture software. If you're using Fire Capture, which is my recommendation, and assuming that you have a decently behaving mount, it doesn't have to be an excellent accuracy, hyper-tuned, super mount. It just needs to be able to track in sidereal reasonably well. But if you've got that, then Fire Capture has a very crude form of auto guiding, in the sense that it's reading off your live feed. It's determining where the brightest pixels are, which is where your target would be, and it's just bumping the mount around to keep those bright pixels in the center of the frame. It works really well. Again, in Planetary, you don't need precision. So even if you've got a very crude mount, it will still do. I mean, I use a very old Celestron C-Gem. It's been heavily abused. It's got a ton of backlash, but it works. So that's all you need.
That makes sense, because the atmospheric distortion is so rapid that you need some other way of taking out that noise other than the mount itself.
Yeah, this sort of imaging is fundamentally different to any other kind of imaging. It's completely the opposite of deep sky imaging. The only similarities between them is that you're using a telescope and a camera and you're looking at the sky, but everything else is completely different. So yeah, all you really need is a decent mount, just to keep the thing more or less pointed in the right direction. Fire Capture can take care of keeping the planet in the center. it can take care of the entire capturing methodology, and from then on, AutoStacker, Registacks, WinJupos, if you choose to go that route, and Photoshop for final tweaks.
Agapios, may I make a
yeah.
suggestion then? Because
Yeah.
this, so Mark is not the only one to have this question with fire capture. We'd like to have you back for a demonstration of this technique with fire capture. Now, the thing is, planetary season is going away. I'm wondering, can we do this on a planetary nebula? Or are they broad enough? Or
no, it's I'd say it's ideal that we do it. Either we find a way to do it now, I mean, relatively soon, or it would have to wait.
Okay.
Or wait, what we could do is we could maybe try towards the summer, when the planets are going to be in the morning sky. I mean, it's early morning now. So we could do a live session on I don't know, Jupiter, Saturn, whenever they come back out of the sun, and we can show fire capture then, if we don't get a chance to do it one of these days.
That's one of the biggest requests we've had, and unfortunately, the weather today didn't cooperate. But yeah, fire capture is a pretty amazing piece of software, but it puts those 4 dots on the outside of the image, and it uses that to frame up and move.
No. You're describing a different thing. Yeah. You're describing.
Okay, then we definitely be back.
Yeah. You're describing another really powerful feature of fire capture, but that's different to auto guiding. But yeah, absolutely, we can do a meeting just talking about all the features in fire capture. And one thing I would say is, even though you can use any software you want to capture, fire capture is the only one that is made for this kind of imaging. It's not a general capture software that can also do planetary. It's a planetary imaging capturing software. It's got all the right tools. It's got all the right parameters. It interconnects with other software in an optimized way. So I highly recommend that you spend the time with it and get familiar with it and use that. It will only make your life easier.
So Agapios, I'm thinking this is probably an ignorant question, but could you use the moon to practice some of these techniques? I mean, the planetary techniques, the same software?
Definitely. The moon or the sun.
So if you wanted to demonstrate some of these things, could it be done on the moon instead of one of the planets?
Or the sun, yes.
Okay. Well, then you wouldn't have to be up in the middle of the night if we did the sun.
Lou, maybe we can do a solar session. I don't know. We'll work that out. We'll find a way to.
Do you have a scope?
Yeah.
That'd be perfect.
So maybe we can do that.
Yeah. Okay. Whenever your schedule.
We'll talk.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll figure it out and see how we can do a session on fire capture.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Okay. So once we've done all our stacking and our sharpening, we can then just go into your tool of choice for final cosmetics and presentation. And this is the result from the data set that we were working with before. It's a combination, a derotation of nine files, 9 consecutive files, identically sharpened, combined, and derotated in WinChupos. And as you can see, let me just pull up the live, the corresponding video, so you can see the difference between live data and process data. Let's see. Okay. And
that's incredible.
Let me just tune this so that it better corresponds to what's on screen. Okay, obviously color is a bit off.
Did you use PIPP, or how did to set up these, or to
No. Just straight out of fire capture into AutoStacker, then Registax, then WinChupos, and Photoshop.
And that debared, or you just
AutoStacker does that. It picks out the proper algorithm depending on the sensor, and it takes care of that. So yeah, this is the power of this methodology. You can capture data that looks like that, and from that you can come to an end result that looks like this.
I mean, that's Olympus Mons right there. That's amazing.
Yeah. And this is really the power of a combination of things. Obviously, nowadays we have excellent optics. We have fantastic sensors to work with, really powerful software that somehow is all free. And when you put all of that together under good conditions, you really are able to make the most of all of that and see incredible details on the planets, and to think that Mars, the information here is spread across 17 arc seconds. So it's a tiny target, but there's still so much detail being resolved. So I highly recommend that whoever wants to give this a fair shot, go through everything that we talked about, the previous session, this session. Feel free to reach out to me at any time. I'm up most of the time, so feel free to reach out. Find me on social media or email or whatever, and I'm more than willing to offer whatever piece of advice I have and help you along the way. I'd love to. I'm gonna make this data available, and I would love to see what you guys do with it. Have a go at processing, and send me some results.
Now, do you have a movie of the file, like of the image on the right, the finished image of stacking the stacks, so that we can see that quality all the way around, or how many hours of data?
Let me see. If I understand correctly, hang on.
Because that's just a still image. I want to see if you have something of that similar quality for, I don't know, 6 hours.
No. The videos are more or less the same as this. What I was going to show is individual processed frames. So
Yes,
these
yes.
now on the screen, these are individual files. And this one, hang on. Okay.
I mean, can't we combine them in order to make a movie is what I'm asking.
You mean like a time lapse?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, we can just flip through them, but some of them are derotated. Okay, so these, okay, the ones.
I see.
So this is the combined result of all of these. So this is the average, let's say, and these are the individuals. These ones. And you can see that the seeing between these is pretty much identical. There isn't any major difference in clarity or resolution between them. Whereas if I go back to the main folder here, if I start to flip through them, you'll notice that some of them are blurry, some of them are sharp. I mean, look at this. Okay, so this is 2137. So it's important to say that these are 1.5 minutes long. Okay, so at 2137, this is the quality. Just 3 minutes later, look at that difference. Let me go back. 2137, 2140. That's just 3 minutes apart in time, and the resolution difference is incredible. That's why I'm saying that you cannot rely on what you're seeing on the screen. You can't just sit there and look at the screen and wait for when you think it looks better to hit record.
Right.
That was the original concept behind Lucky Imaging. I think if you just set fire capture to do an automated, let's say, long set of exposures, that's your best bet to capture better seeing, even if you're not really there, even if you're not looking at the screen. I mean, you could step away from the telescope, you can do something else, you can go in, watch TV, whatever. Telescope is going to get the better data because you've set everything up in this way. So yeah.
Another question here. If you have, let's say you start, imaging Mars when it's high enough that the seeing is good, acceptable. I don't know, 8 o'clock at night, let's say. You hit record and you keep recording all night, one long recording. Can WinGPOs take their data, derotate it, and get an image that way, or is that inefficient?
It's not efficient because you're only going to have one very large file. WinGPOs can sort of sift through a part of that and produce a final result, but it's much more efficient for you to capture consecutive smaller files because they're easier to work with. It's much more efficient for you to shoot individual files, because then you can more easily pick out the better the parts of time where conditions were better.
Right.
So you don't need to work with it one huge 100 gigabyte large file. You can work with a group of smaller, say a total of whatever 10, 15 gigabyte files. So it's more efficient.
Agapios, I have a question about how long you tend to let the capture run for something like Mars. Like it said, you mentioned 90 seconds, so a minute and a half. Is that typical, or do you go longer for Mars since it rotates so slowly?
Again, this is something that you have to determine for your own system. The general guideline is if you're using AutoStackered, because AutoStackered can do some form of derotation, I think you can safely go maybe even up to 3 minutes. But because this is system dependent, it has to do with what kind of resolution your system can get. I recommend that you play it safer and capture less than that. On my C925, I do 90 seconds for Mars, 60 for Saturn, 60 for Jupiter, and 180 for Saturn. But as I said before, work with your own data and see what your telescope can produce. There's a lot of these things have much less of an effect to the final image quality than what the seeing will do to you. What I mean by that is, on any given night, the seeing will have much more of an influence on the quality of your data than your individual capture time, your gain setting, your exposure setting, or your sharpening. Seeing is the king. If seeing is not on your side, nothing else matters. So another really important thing is for you to learn how to predict your local seeing conditions. And seeing can be really local. I've done some testing with a friend using an identical setup just 10 minutes away from me under the same conditions, and we've had massively different resolution coming through the telescopes. So seeing is really localized. So spend the time to sort of learn how your microclimate behaves.
We can move to Barbados.
Or Cyprus.
Yeah. Agapios, could you talk just briefly about collimation and focus? I presume that those are really key to getting good images for Planetary, and I know I don't have a lot of experience with focusing for Planetary or really with collimating my 9 1/4 inch Schmidt Cassegrain. And so maybe this is something that we could take as a sidebar, or maybe you could correspond with me about how good is good enough for collimation and how good is good enough for focus, and do you need to do refocus throughout an evening session, or can you do it at the beginning of the night and then just leave it alone?
Collimation is the key. We talked about this last time with Lou. Think of collimation like if you're playing a musical instrument, you want to know how to tune your musical instrument. And I don't know about you, but there's no way that I would perform with an instrument that's out of tune. So there's all kinds of ways and tools and methods that you can use for collimation. Find the one that works the best for you. My recommendation, which we can talk about in great length if you'd like, is have a look at MetaGuide. which is a free word that you can employ and really, really accurately collimate your telescope on the sky using a star, and incorporate collimation into your overall routine. Collimation should be something that you do instinctively, not something that you attend to maybe once a year or whenever you think that it's necessary. It's something that is paramount, that you tend to it at every session, every single time you set up for imaging. So it has to be part of your workflow. Focusing, again, focusing is on an SCT telescope is relatively easy, and fire capture has a very powerful tool. That's what Lou was talking about before, called the auto align feature, which basically automatically aligns the frames to each other on the fly as you're capturing, so that the target is not moving at all on the screen. So you can touch your telescope and focus, and you would not have any effect on the target. So you can really finely, although manually, you can very finely focus your telescope looking at the target, and you focus on the target that you're capturing. You don't want to focus on a star or whatever. You want to focus on the target. On Mars, there's some really, it's relatively easy to hit crucial focus because there's very high contrast. On Saturn, you can use the rings. On Jupiter, you can use the moons. And focus is, again, a continuously changing thing. You have to keep readjusting your focus. I'd say every 20 minutes, half an hour, whatever, depending on your weather and on how quickly you lose temperature. But it's not something that you do at the beginning of your session and forget about it. You have to come back to focus again and again, and you will notice that after a while you will learn to sort of predict your telescope's behavior. For example, I know that for an X number of temperature shift, I have to move my my focuser an X number of steps. So this will become sort of second nature to you. But yeah, collimation is the number one thing you want to invest your time into learning about. And focus is something that you have to be continuously on top of.
Okay.
Can we just drive the point home on how important it is when we're collimating an SCT, for example, to have the highest optical zoom possible, and instead of digital zoom, to get the most accurate focus. And then when that happens, your star is going to move. So you have to reposition the telescope all the time so that it's in the center. So in other words, what I'm saying is it's a good idea to use a Barlow lens rather than a digital zoom when you're collimating, or does that make a difference?
No, you're onto something there. SCTs and other telescopes as well, but SCTs mostly, they're good performers on axis. So you want to evaluate anything that you're doing when your target is on axis. So you center the star, you use high magnification. You may also use a near infrared filter that can also help with the seeing. but you have your star centered to evaluate what you need to tune. You tune, obviously the star is going to shift out of the center. Then you use the mount to reposition the star in the center to reevaluate. So you evaluate, you move, you recenter, reevaluate, move, and so on and so on. So whatever you do, before you make any adjustments, your target has to be in the center.
And this is all, you want this done with optical zoom, not digital zoom.
No, it depends on what you're doing. For me, if I'm using software, I'm using a camera. So I'm not visually looking at the target. I have pretty much the same way I'm going to be capturing. So camera, Barlow lens, dispersion corrector, everything is in the imaging train, and I'm looking at the screen.
Yeah, that's what I mean. You have to, you need to use your Barlow lens.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you don't have a Barlow lens, it's not going to be as accurate. No. Right. You can't.
You need to be at a high focal ratio.
Right. Okay. That was the.
Yeah.
What I was trying to make. Okay. It's a lot easier because the Barlow lens too. Also, you want to make sure that it's when you put it in, it's exactly parallel. It's orthogonal. Some of them have screws on the bottom. Sometimes the Barlow lens tilts if you're not careful. And that will throw everything off.
Yeah. Make sure that you have good quality accessories on the back of your telescope. The visual back, the Barlow lens, whatever you can thread together, do that. That's much better than having things in and out all the time. Compression rings can bend, screws can strip out. Make sure you have a solid connection between the camera and the telescope.
Agapios, I have a question about IR cut filters, the placement of them in particular. I have an option on my particular sensor of either putting it almost directly against the sensor or at the end of the 1 1/4 inch adapter. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that. The reason why I'm asking, I'm being plagued with some weird geometric shapes that show up on my images. And
how so?
When I look at the images, it just seems like there's like right angle lines and whatnot. And I'm kind of pulling my hair out trying
on what target?
I'm sorry?
On what target?
Mars, but also Jupiter over the summer. And I mean, I can put the image in, Photoshop and blur it out, I guess, do a Gaussian blur on it. But I'm just
what's your setup exactly?
C11 with a 2-power Barlow, pretty much. That's Teleview Barlow.
And camera?
ZWO was a 462. 1-shot color. And ZWO's IR cut filter.
Hang on. So
until this year I was shooting monochrome and never really had any issues like that. I would shoot in RGB and then put it in combine it in WinJu posts, and I didn't really have that kind of issue. But so I'm not sure if it's something with the sensor or
here's the thing. The 462 has a 2.9 micron size pixel.
Right.
If you use the general rule of thumb of 5 times pixel size for optimal focal ratio, that's 14.5. Right. And you're shooting at 20. F10 times 2, you're shooting at 20. That may have some effect on
right.
that
I know
geometric pattern on that geometric pattern. What Barlow are you using specifically?
That's a 2-power Teleview Barlow. So
okay,
I think
what you can do, if it's a Teleview, it's an apochromat.
Yeah.
What you can do is you can unscrew the optical element. You don't need the whole length of the barrel. You can just keep the optical element, and you can either directly screw it onto the nose piece on the 462, or maybe you'll need some adapters to make that happen. So you want to bring you want to bring the sensor closer to the Barlow element, and that will cut down on the amplification factor.
Right.
So that will bring you closer to where you should be with that sensor. Now, the filter, I haven't found any difference between having the filter close to the sensor or much further away. As I'm shooting now, my filter is a good 4 inches away from the sensor, because I have I'm using a filter wheel, and there's I have some extensions, some adapters, the atmospheric dispersion corrector, and then my sensor. So there's quite a long way between them, and there's no effect.
Okay. All right. Thanks very much for that.
No problem.
A related question, back focus for Planetary, does it matter? Or is it pretty flexible, or do you have to be really precise about it?
No, it's really flexible. To put it simply, you don't need to worry about that at all. The only instance where back focus becomes an issue is if you're using atmospheric dispersion corrector, because spacing between sensor and dispersion corrector has an effect on the dispersion corrector's corrective power. That's the only scenario where back focus comes into question. All other times, there's no issue.
So
you can put whatever you want behind the telescope, between the telescope and the sensor, no issue. Yeah.
You mean I can have 1 foot imaging or 2 foot? So I tried for the first time to image Mars last week. Couldn't get it into focus. I didn't know what I was doing wrong, and I thought maybe I added too long of an extension. But
what telescope?
Edge HD8, and I had
and you couldn't get it to focus.
I had a 2. I had it able to focus before, but I had a 2.5 teleview, right up against the as close as I can get to the 224 MC. But I got the moon in there, but I couldn't get sharp focus. I don't know. It just kept moving around. Maybe I needed more time to play with it. I don't know, but you're telling me I just should be more patient. Doesn't matter how long that length is.
It's a good idea to have a good amount of patience for this.
But I didn't know if I needed to add the extra nose piece on the. I took everything off. And I added all the connectors that the telescope came with to get regular back focus with a DSLR at 136 millimeter.
No, you don't need to worry about that when it comes to Planetary. All you need is make sure you have your focal ratio more or less where it should be, and backspacing and all that doesn't really matter. Obviously, having a foot-long extension coming out of the back of your telescope may be an overstatement, but you don't need to be critical about these things. It's not the same as DSO imaging, where you have correction issues, flatness issues, all of that. You don't need to worry about that.
I was just wondering if I took off the extra extension piece, if it would have helped.
Probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
And now we're going to be rained out here until Sunday. so I'm not gonna try it again.
So
I'm not gonna
Agapios,
get a picture like that.
as I understood it, the only thing is you want to put this atmospheric distortion corrector right in front of the camera. That's get it as close as you can.
The best place for it to be is between the camera and the Barlow lens.
Oh,
So it has to be telescope, Barlow lens, dispersion corrector, sensor.
got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the distance between we've talked about this the last time as well. You need to be wary of what kind of Barlow lens you're using. If it's a telecentric Barlow lens, you can be much more flexible on what you have after the Barlow lens, because there's no distance doesn't affect the amplification factor. If it's not a telecentric, then you need to be really careful, because the further back you go, the more magnification factor you're going to get. So adding the dispersion corrector after a non-telecentric Barlow means you're going to gain a lot of focal length. So that's why you need to mess with it and sort of isolate the optical element so that it comes closer to the sensor, so that you're saving a lot of that additional focal ratio.
Maybe that's where the problem is, because the teleview I have, the further away, the less, it's 2.5.
No, you shouldn't have any issue with that combination. I've used the exact same combination, and you shouldn't have an issue
With the teleview, but it says on the literature,
on the 2.5, if from a certain length and onwards, it starts to drop off instead of gain.
Right.
But it's mostly the same. I think for about 100 millimeters or something, it's the same. Yeah, and then it starts to drop off slightly.
Okay, I'm just trying to figure out what I did wrong.
Agapios, and relative to the question with the that you were talking about in terms of the telecentric or conventional Barlow, like if you're using, if I understand you correctly, if you're using something like a PowerMate, which has effectively parallel rays coming out of the part that would be facing the sensor, then the ADC position is less critical than if you were to use that in conjunction with a conventional Barlow?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So what is exactly then the difference between the PowerMate and a Barlow? Because that's what I was using, was the PowerMate.
Well, a PowerMate is parallel rays, as Gary just mentioned, and backspacing having no effect on the amplification factor. That's why they were developed. Whereas a conventional Barlow, the further out you go, the more magnification you get, and you can see this if you compare a ×2 and a ×3. The only difference between them is the length of a barrel. So the optical element is the same, but the barrel is longer on the 3.
I'm gonna try this again before Morris goes away. I hate it when I have a problem unsolved. Thank you.
Okay, guys, as I said, feel free to reach out on email or whatever. I'm more than happy to connect with all of you and exchange, experiences, ideas, questions, whatever. I love talking about this stuff, and I love talking about it with people who appreciate it. So feel free anytime.
So Agapios, can we make the data then? Do you have a Google Drive?
Yes.
Okay. Do you think that might be the best?
So I will put everything together, and I will send Lou. I will send you the link, and maybe you can redistribute to all the guys, or
yeah.
I don't know. I'll find some way to make it available to
Yeah, if you send it to Astro Imagers, dva.org.
Okay.
Look at it.
Okay. And have a go at the data. Get in touch if you need help with processing, and I would love to see your results.
All right, and then we got to think about another date for the fire capture and the solar.
Yeah, maybe we can do it with the sun.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. Yeah, and you said you had a solar scope, correct?
Yes, I do.
And this way you don't have to stay up at night. Maybe it's us. Now the tables, maybe we'll be up at 2:00.
Yeah.
We turn. You're like, yeah.
That'll be fun to try.
Fair. Well, it's a 7-hour time change. What's the best time of day to do solar?
As early as possible.
Early in the day?
Generally speaking, solar imaging should be done as early as possible. Because the later you stay, the more effect you have from all the thermals happening as the ground is getting cooked.
Right.
So the earlier you do it, the better.
So that might mean like midnight for us and early morning for you.
Yeah.
We'll let you decide that, and we're looking forward to that.
Yeah.
We're keeping you busy, my friend.
No, that's good. That's great.
Well, I don't know if we should keep you up much longer. We need to get some sleep so that you can present to us the next time.
Yeah.
Anybody
Thank you
else
so
have
much.
Any more questions for Agapios?
Yeah. Thank you very much, Agapios. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you,
thanks,
guys.
Lou, for organizing it.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank
I
you.
didn't do anything. Agapios did all the talking.
No, thank you, guys. I have a great time with you every time we meet. This is a great group, and as I said, I appreciate talking about all this stuff with people, like-minded people.
Yeah.
And I'd love to chat with each and every one of you. So feel free to reach out.
Very good. Thank you, Agapios.
Good, thank you. Take care.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
Thank you, guys.
Get some rest.
I think we're gonna make you an honorary member. So that,
I will be very honored.
well, that way, you can be included in our correspondence, and you can see what's. You don't have to answer to everything, but you can see what we're doing.
I would love to. I would love to.
All right, we'll work on that, and I'll talk to you about the details.
And we can do this, in a structured way as well. We can maybe do more of these.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and if you are going to Neath, let us know.
Oh, yeah, you're not going by yourself.
Oh yeah,
You
absolutely.
need a guide, man. Yeah. Are you kidding?
Yeah, need somebody to tell me where you eat.
Yeah, we'll come pick you up from the airport. We'll take care of you.
All right.
Yep.
All right.
Best wishes.
And
care now.
there's an open invitation to anybody who's willing to travel in this part of the world. If you're ever in Cyprus, let me know.
Yeah,
Thank
right
you.
now we need a lot of money to go there.
Sounds great.
My wife is saying thank you too, Agapios.
Oh.
Oh,
Cyprus sounded really good to her this time of year.
It is.
Sounds
It is.
good to
I'd love to see you here.
That's
Sign
one
me up.
expensive seminar.
Yeah, right.
Thank you so much.
Why don't we make it a group effort, guys? I mean, we're going to go to the eclipse. Might as well go to Cyprus.
Yeah, we have astrotourism here as well. So
Yeah. Well, you know what? That's it, Agapios. I have an idea. You come down here for the great eclipse coming up, and then we'll have to return the favor.
yeah,
That's
I'd
it,
love that.
all the way in Texas.
Yeah.
Or it actually depends. It's going to go all across the country, but the best place will probably be Texas to view it. It's everywhere else. We have a lot of clouds, and especially where we live here, the jet stream loves to park right over top of us. And it just hangs out there.
That's why you guys have other hobbies as well.
Yeah.
See, I only do astronomy, so
It's hard to do planetary imaging because you really need good seeing.
yeah.
But Tom actually here. Tom manages. Tom Nolasco.
Yeah, I saw Tom pop up at some point. Now I've lost him. He got some really good images recently. Done a really good job with it.
Yeah, he did a great job.
Well, that's because I was following all your directions.
Oh, there you are. Hey, Tom.
Hey,
How you doing?
yeah, I'm working on Mars. I don't do any of the WinJupo stuff yet, which I really should do because that would probably help. I just
It
bring
would-
it to
it would
AutoStacker
definitely-
and Registax.
Definitely. Yeah.
Have you seen any of Tom's solar images?
Yes, I have. Yeah, I have.
Absolutely
Fantastic. Yeah.
So vis-a-vis the eclipse, how does one shoot an eclipse? Is it similar to just shooting solar that you'd want to have a similar setup, or what would be your first thoughts about planning for shooting an eclipse?
It depends on what part of the eclipse you want to capture. I mean, if you want to capture the entirety of the thing, a more atmospheric view, then you approach it differently than if you want to capture specific things like the Bailey's beads or the solar corona or whatever. It depends on how you want to frame it and exactly what you want to do with it.
We can talk about that, Mark, on one of our regular workshops too, because
That
some
would
of
be
us
great.
have we're at the 2017 solar eclipse and got decent results with it.
Yeah, Gary, you had a pretty amazing shot of the Bailey's beads, diamonds, and all the way across. And you weren't even doing that. You had that set up automatically. You were just enjoying the eclipse.
Yeah, there's scripting software that's freeware. Like Agapios said, most of the stuff in this hobby seems to be free in terms of software. But there's excellent scripting software, and then you can run some experiments with your setup and make sure that you have the right field of view, things of that sort, and then enjoy watching it with the naked eye while the camera's sitting there tethered to your laptop, just doing its thing. And even what Tom did, Tom wanted to watch it, and he set up a video camera. He set the camera in a video mode and got excellent results.
I just took a straight video and then went back and sliced it up into like the beginning, the middle, and the end, just taking, not that many frames, maybe a couple hundred frames, and then went through the same business with AutoStacker and Registax, and and you can get kind of stills out of that, just a straight video.
Yeah, so
you got a straight video at the end too, which is kind of fun.
Yeah, we should let Agapios get to sleep.
Yeah,
we can go over that separately.
Okay, sounds good.
All night.
I'll pay you back when we do the solar.
Yeah,
solar
right.
session.
That's right. Fair's fair.
That's right.
Okay.
Well,
All right,
thank you
guys.
again, Agapios.
Okay. Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure, and talk to you soon. And feel free to reach out.
Thank you. Bye-bye now. Good night.
Take care.
The rest of you guys have anything else you need to talk about?
I'm good.
The presentation.
I'm good for now.
Oh, Gary.
Yeah.
You know what? The way you put the stellarium views.
Lou, do you want to stop recording?
Oh yeah. Good thinking.